In the spring of 1912, I found myself standing on the docks of Southampton, gazing in awe at the largest moving object ever built by man, the RMS Titanic. It was a beast of a vessel, gleaming in the early morning light, its towering funnels reaching up to the sky, as if it were trying to grasp the heavens themselves. I was a young man then, barely 20, with nothing to my name but the clothes on my back and a heart full of dreams. Driven by a restless spirit and a desire to escape the shadows of my past, I saw the Titanic not just as a ship, but as a symbol of a new beginning, a chance to carve out a place for myself in the vast world beyond the English shores. My reasons for stowing away were as much about fleeing from the ghosts of my past as they were about the magnetic pull of adventure that the Titanic promised. The newspapers had been full of stories about this marvel of engineering, calling it the unsinkable ship, a floating palace that was to embark on its maiden voyage across the Atlantic to New York. I had heard tales of the opulence that awaited its passengers, of grand staircases, luxurious cabins, and sumptuous dining rooms where the elite of the world would gather. And there I was, a nobody, daring to believe that I could be part of this historic journey, if only from the shadows. As I sneaked aboard amidst the chaos of departure, my heart was racing with the thrill of the unknown. I managed to blend in with the crowds of well-wishers and workers, slipping through the cracks and finding a hidden nook in the bowels of the ship. From my secret vantage point, I could hear the sounds of the ship coming to life, the hum of anticipation from the passengers, and the orders barked by the crew. The very air was electric with the promise of adventure, and I felt a surge of excitement at the thought of witnessing the wonders of this floating city. But even as I marveled at the Titanic's grandeur, a part of me couldn't help but feel an undercurrent of apprehension. Perhaps it was the way the ship seemed too proud, too certain of its invincibility against the forces of nature. I brushed those thoughts aside, convincing myself that the journey ahead would be nothing short of miraculous. After all, I was about to embark on a voyage across the Atlantic on the greatest ship ever built, a voyage that I hoped would carry me away from the shadows of my past into the light of new possibilities. Little did I know, as the Titanic set sail into the open sea, that our destinies were already being woven together in a tapestry of triumph and tragedy, a journey that would test the limits of human courage and despair. And as the coastline faded into the distance, I stepped deeper into the heart of the Titanic, unaware of the chilling fate that awaited us all. My first day aboard the Titanic began with the heart-thumping thrill of the unknown. As I merged with the bustling crowd on the docks, my senses overwhelmed by the cacophony of farewells and the thunderous blasts of the ship's horns. Dressed in my most inconspicuous clothes, I was just another face among the sea of hopefuls and dreamers, all drawn to the allure of the Titanic. Slipping aboard was a dance with fate. I timed my steps with the ebb and flow of workers and supplies, moving through the ship's gaping maw. My heart raced as I darted behind crates and dodged the vigilant eyes of the crew, finding myself finally within the steel belly of the Leviathan. The ship was a labyrinth of corridors and compartments, a marvel of craftsmanship and ambition. As I found a cramped, dimly lit space to claim as my own, I couldn't help but marvel at the hum of activity that resonated through the walls. The air was thick with anticipation, and even hidden away in the bowels of the ship, I could feel the vibrancy of life pulsating through the Titanic. In those first hours, I ventured cautiously, observing the passengers and crew from the shadows. The passengers were a spectacle of the era's wealth and fashion, adorned in their finest as they strolled the decks and lounged in the opulent public areas. Their laughter and chatter were a constant melody, speaking of excitement for the journey and dreams of the new world that awaited them. The crew, on the other hand, moved with a precision and urgency that betrayed the immense responsibility resting on their shoulders. They were the guardians of this floating palace, each one playing a part in the intricate ballet that kept the Titanic gliding gracefully across the waters. As I watched from my hidden corners, I was struck by the contrasts that filled the ship. Below deck, in the engine room, the air was hot and thick, the stokers toiling tirelessly to feed the hungry furnaces that powered the colossal engines. Their faces were etched with the soot and sweat of their labor, a stark contrast to the carefree elegance of the passengers above. Yet, despite the divide, there was a sense of unity, a shared purpose that bound everyone aboard the Titanic. We were all, in our own way, chasing horizons, whether they were of land, fortune, or freedom. My first day passed in a blur of wonder and wariness. I managed to scavenge some scraps of food and found water to quench my thirst, all the while evading detection. As night fell, and the ship sailed deeper into the open sea, I lay in my cramped hideaway, the gentle rocking of the ship lulling me into a restless sleep. Dreams of grand adventures mingled with the fear of discovery, but above all, there was an overriding sense of having embarked on a journey that was about to change the course of my life forever. In those quiet, stolen moments, the Titanic felt like a world unto itself, a microcosm of society floating between the old world and the new. Little did I know, as I drifted off to sleep, that the days ahead would reveal the true nature of our voyage, one that would etch its name in history not for its beginnings, but for its tragic end. As the Titanic sliced through the icy waters of the North Atlantic, its inhabitants, blissfully unaware of the fate that lay ahead, played out the dramas of their lives, against the backdrop of the sea's endless expanse. Among the many souls aboard, 3 groups stood out to me, their stories weaving through the fabric of the journey, each adding layers to the unfolding narrative. My first encounter with Mr. Andrews was a stroke of luck, or perhaps fate, disguised as a near mishap. While exploring the maze of corridors late one evening, I stumbled upon him, literally, as I rounded a corner too quickly. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a demeanor that suggested a well of patience. "Watch your step, young man," he said, steadying me with a firm grip. "Wouldn't want you getting lost on this big ship, now would we?" His voice carried a hint of suspicion, but also a warmth that I found comforting. Over the following days, our paths crossed more often than I cared to admit, each encounter leaving me with the impression that his suspicion was growing, tempered only by his innate kindness. Mr. Andrews seemed to embody the spirit of the Titanic itself. Grand, steadfast, and imbued with a sense of duty to the well-being of all aboard. The Harringtons were a spectacle of wealth and mystery, a family whose secrets seemed as deep and as dark as the ocean itself. Lord Harrington, a man with a stern countenance and an air of unmistakable authority, was accompanied by his wife, Lady Elizabeth, a woman whose beauty was matched only by her silence. Their 2 children, Charles and Annabel, were a study in contrasts. Charles, the elder, was reserved and brooding, while Annabel was lively, her laughter ringing through the halls like a bell. It was whispered among the passengers that the Harringtons were fleeing scandal, seeking a fresh start in America away from the prying eyes of the British press. Their interactions with others were polite yet distant, as if they were always guarding against getting too close, afraid that their secrets might slip through the cracks of their carefully constructed facade. Below deck, far from the opulent suites and the grand dining rooms, I found the true heart of the Titanic. A group of engineers and stokers who toiled day and night to keep the great ship moving. Led by Chief Engineer Joseph Bell, this was a brotherhood forged in fire and steam, men who took great pride in their work and in the ship they served. They spoke of the Titanic's engines with a reverence reserved for the sacred, boasting of her unmatched speed and strength. To them, the Titanic was not just a ship, she was a testament to human ingenuity and determination, a symbol of progress in an age that revered it above all else. Their pride was infectious, and in their company, I felt a surge of hope that maybe, just maybe, the Titanic really was unsinkable. These characters, each in their own way, painted a portrait of life aboard the Titanic that was as complex as it was fascinating. As I moved among them, a silent observer to their hopes and fears, I couldn't help but feel drawn into the web of their lives, a stowaway not just on a ship, but on a journey through the human heart. In the bowels of the ship, where the heart of the Titanic beat strongest, I found myself drawn to the pulsating energy of the engine room. The air was thick with heat and the scent of oil, a testament to the ceaseless labor of the men who fed the beast that powered our voyage. It was here, amid the roar of machinery and the rhythmic clanking of metal, that I first heard the murmurs of ambition that would steer us toward tragedy. The engineers spoke among themselves with a mix of pride and pressure, their words carrying the weight of expectations. "We're pushing her harder tonight," one of them said, his voice barely rising above the din. "The old man wants to make headlines, beat the crossing record." There was pride in his tone, but beneath it lay a thread of apprehension, a sense of unease that they were tempting fate with their haste. As I lingered in the shadows, my presence unnoticed, the conversations I overheard painted a picture of a crew caught between the command to achieve greatness and the knowledge of the sea's merciless power. The chief engineer, a pillar of strength and resolve, was seen conferring with his team, his voice steady, but his brow furrowed with concern. "Keep an eye on the boilers. We don't want to push them beyond their limit," he instructed, a note of caution underlying his authoritative demeanor. The ambition to set a new crossing record was not confined to the engine room. Officers on the bridge spoke in hushed tones about the captain's orders to increase speed, despite the warnings of ice in the ship's path. Among the passengers, the buzz of excitement about our record-breaking attempt was palpable. The Titanic was not just a ship, she was a symbol of human achievement, a floating palace that defied the limits of technology and nature. But as I listened to their laughter and saw the light of adventure in their eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in my chest. The sea does not bow to the will of man, and hubris on the water can exact a fearsome price. As the days passed and the Titanic surged forward, slicing through the cold, dark waters with relentless speed, I found myself increasingly isolated in my apprehension. The ship, a marvel of engineering, seemed invincible to those who walked her decks, blind to the warning signs that nature whispered in the wind. But I, a stowaway hidden in the shadows, could feel the undercurrents of danger that flowed beneath our feet. The Titanic was racing not just against time, but against the very forces of nature, and in that race, I feared we were all but mere passengers, hurtling toward an unknown fate. As night cloaked the Titanic in its silent embrace, the boundary between reality and the ethereal world seemed to blur, especially for me, hidden away in the shadows of the great ship. My days were spent in the clandestine observation of life aboard, but it was in the quiet solitude of night that my mind wandered into the realm of dreams, where premonitions and foreboding whispered to me from the depths. Each night, as I found a secluded corner or an unattended berth to rest, sleep came uneasily, dragging me down into a churning sea of unsettling visions. In these dreams, I was adrift in an endless ocean, the Titanic a mere specter on the horizon, her lights flickering like the last gasps of life in a dying world. The stars above were dim, obscured by a creeping fog that seemed to swallow everything in its path, including hope. The dreams were vivid, filled with symbols and omens I could not understand. Ice, cold and unforgiving, featured prominently, its jagged edges glinting menacingly in the moonlight. Shadows moved beneath the waves, formless and fleeting, hinting at dangers lurking unseen. Voices, muffled and distant, called out in warning, but their words were carried away by the wind, leaving me with a sense of desperation and need to act, but with no direction. Awake, these dreams haunted me, their images lingering at the edge of my consciousness, a constant reminder of a doom I felt powerless to prevent. My days were filled with a growing sense of unease, a foreboding that something terrible was on the horizon. I found myself watching the crew and passengers with a new intensity, searching their faces for signs of the dread that gripped me. But life aboard the Titanic marched on, oblivious to the shadows that danced in my mind. I struggled to understand the significance of these dreams, to decipher the message they were trying to convey. Was it merely the product of my own fears and anxieties, amplified by my clandestine existence aboard this leviathan of the sea? Or was it something more, a preternatural warning of a disaster that lay in wait? The rational part of my mind sought to dismiss these nocturnal visions as the fanciful creations of isolation and stress. Yet, the primal, instinctive part of me, the part that had always been attuned to the unseen currents of the world, could not shake the feeling that these dreams were a portent, a glimpse into a future that was barreling toward us with the inexorable force of the Titanic herself. As the days passed and the ship drew ever closer to her destiny, the line between dream and reality grew ever more indistinct. The whispers of foreboding that had once been confined to the realm of sleep now echoed in the daylight, a ghostly chorus that only I could hear. I was a man caught between worlds, the tangible and the ethereal, bearing the weight of knowledge that I could neither fully grasp nor communicate. The Titanic, in all her glory, sailed on, heedless of the shadows that clung to her hull, and I, a silent witness to her journey, could only watch and wait, hoping against hope that the visions that tormented me were but the creations of my own imagination. The Titanic, a behemoth of steel and steam, cut through the North Atlantic's icy waters with the confidence of a ship deemed unsinkable. Yet, as we ventured further into the heart of the ocean, a series of mysterious occurrences began to unfold, each a harbinger of the disaster that loomed on the horizon. These events, though seemingly minor in isolation, wove a tapestry of warning that was, tragically, ignored by those in command. One night, shrouded in a thick fog that seemed to swallow the ship whole, a near miss with another vessel sent a ripple of unease through the crew. I was lurking near the bow, lost in my thoughts, when the blare of a ship's horn shattered the silence, followed by the urgent shouts of the Titanic's lookouts. The crew sprang into action, their professionalism masking the underlying panic as they narrowly avoided a collision. This incident, while averted without harm, served as a stark reminder of the sea's unpredictability and the peril of navigating its treacherous waters. Not long after, a minor fire broke out in one of the boiler rooms, a heart of the ship where the flames of human ambition burned brightest. I learned of the incident through hushed conversations among the crew, their words tinged with concern. Though the fire was quickly contained, it left behind a sense of vulnerability, a crack in the facade of the Titanic's invincibility. The fire's cause was whispered to be a combination of human error and the relentless push for speed, a dangerous game played at the edge of safety. Most ominous of all were the ice warnings that began to dot our path. Ships ahead relayed messages of ice fields and towering icebergs, nature's sentinels guarding the waters we sought to conquer. These warnings were delivered to the bridge, where the captain, under immense pressure from the ship's owners, chose to press on. The White Star Line had much at stake, and the Titanic's maiden voyage was a statement of technological supremacy and commercial ambition. The captain's decisions, influenced by this pressure, prioritized speed and spectacle over caution, dismissing the icy threats as mere obstacles to be outmaneuvered. I observed these events unfold with a growing sense of dread, each occurrence a piece of the puzzle that was becoming increasingly clear. The Titanic, for all her might and majesty, was not merely battling the elements, she was being steered by human arrogance, a belief that technology could triumph over nature's might. The near miss, the fire, and the ignored ice warnings were not isolated incidents, but symptoms of a larger malaise, a disregard for the forces that lay beyond our control. As the ship continued its journey, these ominous signs were overlooked by many, overshadowed by the grandeur of the Titanic and the excitement of the voyage. But for me, a silent observer cloaked in the anonymity of my stowaway existence, they were clear indicators of a tragic fate that awaited us. The sea, with its dark depths and icy heart, does not suffer arrogance lightly, and the Titanic, despite her strength, was but a fragile vessel in the vast, indifferent ocean. The warnings, unheeded and dismissed, would soon converge into a calamity of unimaginable proportions, a testament to the folly of man's hubris in the face of nature's immutable laws. In the midst of mounting unease and the ship's relentless march towards destiny, my solitary existence was pierced by an unexpected connection. Among the sea of faces, one crew member, a young man not much older than myself, with eyes as wary as they were kind, crossed my path under the most unanticipated circumstances. His name was Thomas, a steward whose duties often led him to the quieter, more secluded parts of the ship, where I found fleeting refuge. Our acquaintance began with suspicion. Thomas had noticed signs of my clandestine presence. A misplaced item here, an uneaten portion of food there. Instead of raising alarm, however, curiosity piqued his interest. One evening, as I hid in the shadows of the lower decks, our paths finally converged. "I know you're there," he called out softly, his voice tinged with an empathy I hadn't expected. "You must be hungry and cold. No one needs to know." In his hand was a modest offering of bread and cheese, extended towards the darkness that concealed me. Thus began our unlikely alliance. Thomas, it turned out, harbored his own reservations about the Titanic's voyage. His concerns echoed my own forebodings, creating a bond forged in the shared apprehension of the looming iceberg fields. Nights when the ship was asleep, we would meet in secret. He shared tales of the crew's whispered doubts, the unsettling rush to break transatlantic speed records, and the captain's dismissal of the ice warnings that had been accumulating like ominous clouds on the horizon. Thomas revealed a depth of knowledge about the ship's design and the North Atlantic's treacherous waters. "She's a marvel, no doubt," he confessed one night, his voice barely a whisper, "but even the mightiest ship can't outrun nature's wrath. And these waters? They're unforgiving." His words, spoken with a conviction born of life at sea, added weight to the sense of impending doom that had taken root in my heart. Our conversations, though brief, painted a vivid picture of the Titanic's vulnerabilities. Thomas spoke of the pressure from the ship's owners to make a headline-grabbing maiden voyage, of the captain's pride intertwining with the corporate ambition, and of the engineers' quiet concerns about pushing the ship's engines to their limits. As the ship steered closer to its tragic encounter, my conversations with Thomas became a source of solace. They were a beacon of humanity in the cold expanse of the ocean, a testament to the small but significant acts of kindness that emerge in the face of adversity. Yet, as much as Thomas offered me companionship and insight, our alliance also deepened the sense of responsibility I felt. I was no longer a mere observer of the Titanic's fate, I was now a participant, however small, in the unfolding drama of human courage and frailty. Our shared concern for the ship's safety and the well-being of those aboard became a silent pact. In the vast, indifferent sweep of the Atlantic, Thomas and I stood together, two souls bound by a common foreboding, watching, waiting, and hoping against hope that our fears would prove unfounded. The night the Titanic met its fate was a tapestry of starlit skies and an ominous calm that blanketed the North Atlantic. The air was biting cold, a harbinger of the catastrophe that lurked in the darkness. It was a night where destiny would etch its mark in history, a tragedy foretold yet wholly unimaginable until the moment of impact. I was below deck when the ship shuddered violently, a groan of metal so profound it seemed to echo through the very soul of the Titanic. The initial reaction was one of disbelief, such was the faith in this leviathan of the seas, that the thought of any mishap, let alone a disaster, was inconceivable. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause, as if the ocean held its breath, mourning the impending doom of its unwary challenger. Whispers turned to murmurs, and murmurs to cries as the reality of our situation dawned. Thomas found me amidst the chaos, his face a mask of fear and resolve. "It's happened," he said, his voice a mix of shock and clarity. "We've struck ice." His confirmation shattered any lingering hopes of a false alarm. The Titanic, the unsinkable ship, had met its match against a silent sentinel of the North Atlantic. Panic began to seep into the heart of the ship as passengers and crew alike grappled with the unfolding disaster. The initial disbelief quickly gave way to a growing tide of fear. Women clutched their children, men shouted orders, and crew members scrambled to enact protocols that seemed woefully inadequate for the magnitude of the crisis. The grandeur of the Titanic, moments before a symbol of human achievement, now felt like a gilded cage plunging into the abyss. The sound of lifeboats being lowered, the cries for help, the scramble for life vests had all merged into a cacophony of despair. Thomas and I moved together, drawn by some unspoken pact to offer aid where we could, even as the ship began its inexorable tilt into the dark, icy waters. The bright lights of the Titanic, once a beacon of civilization's triumph, now cast a ghastly glow on the faces of those caught in the nightmare. As the reality of the situation sank in, the distinction between first-class magnates and third-class passengers blurred into a singular, shared desperation. Wealth and status, so paramount in the days that led up to the disaster, now seemed petty and insignificant. The ship, a microcosm of society's hierarchy, was democratized by disaster, uniting everyone in a common struggle for survival. The disbelief that had initially muted the response to the collision transformed into a palpable sense of urgency. Orders were given, sometimes followed, sometimes lost in the tumult of voices and the overpowering instinct to survive. The crew, trained for emergencies but not for catastrophes of this magnitude, fought valiantly against the inevitable, their efforts a testament to the human spirit's resilience, even in the face of overwhelming odds. In those final hours, the Titanic was more than just a sinking ship, it was a stage upon which the full spectrum of human emotion and endeavor was displayed. Courage and cowardice, altruism and selfishness, hope and despair all played out in the shadow of impending doom. The growing panic, a natural human response to the unthinkable, was countered only by acts of incredible bravery and sacrifice, small beacons of light in the darkest of nights. As the Titanic embraced its watery grave, the ocean's icy grip claiming those who perished, the world was left to mourn not just the loss of lives, but the shattering of an era's pride and the harsh reminder of nature's indomitable will. The initial disbelief among passengers and crew, so starkly transformed into a crescendo of panic, would echo through history, a haunting reminder of the night when the impossible became a heart-wrenching reality. As the Titanic began its final descent into the icy depths of the North Atlantic, the corridors and decks that I had stealthily navigated in secret became arteries of escape and desperation. The knowledge of the ship's layout, once a tool for my concealment, now transformed into a lifeline I could offer to the bewildered and terrified souls around me. My status as a stowaway, irrelevant in the face of such calamity, dissolved as I thrust myself into the fray, driven by an urgent need to make amends for my silent voyage. The chaos was palpable, a thick cloud of fear that suffocated reason and humanity in some, while in others, it ignited a fierce will to survive, not just for themselves, but for those around them. I moved through the throngs of people, my voice firm as I directed them to the nearest stairwells and lifeboats, my hand steady as I assisted the elderly and comforted the children whose tears were nearly lost in the cacophony of cries and shouts. In those desperate moments, the ship's grandeur and luxury faded into a grim backdrop for the rawest human instincts. Yet, amidst the panic, acts of incredible heroism and self-sacrifice emerged. I witnessed men and women, who just days before had been strangers, now linked arm in arm, their fates intertwined as they worked together to lower lifeboats and strap life vests onto those too panicked to do so themselves. The ship's crew, despite their own fears, marshaled their courage to maintain order, their voices cutting through the din with commands and reassurances. But where there was valor, there was also cowardice. I saw able-bodied men push past children and the elderly, their eyes wild with fear, as they fought for a place in the lifeboats. I saw arguments erupt over precious spaces, the veneer of civility shattered by the instinct for self-preservation. These moments of devastating cowardice, though fewer, left a bitter taste, a stark contrast to the solidarity and bravery displayed by many. Thomas and I worked side by side, our earlier conversations about the ship's vulnerabilities, now a haunting prelude to the tragedy unfolding. We used every piece of knowledge at our disposal, guiding groups towards less crowded evacuation points, improvising solutions to free jammed lifeboat winches, and always moving against the tide of despair to instill a glimmer of hope. As the ship's angle grew more pronounced, the sounds of desperation grew louder, a symphony of human emotion that ranged from resigned sobriety to frenetic terror. In those moments, I realized that the Titanic was not just sinking, it was taking with it the illusion of invincibility, the belief that human ingenuity could conquer nature's whims. It was a humbling, terrifying lesson, taught at the cost of so many lives. My attempts to help, fueled by a desire to atone for my shadowy presence on this voyage, brought me face to face with the best and worst of humanity. I saw the depth of human courage, the capacity for sacrifice, and the indomitable spirit that refuses to yield even in the face of certain death. Yet, I also witnessed the darkness that can consume the soul when fear takes hold, the moments when self-interest eclipses the common good. As the final moments approached and the Titanic's fate was sealed, I realized that this ship, a marvel of its time, had become more than just a vessel for transatlantic passage. It was a crucible for the human condition, testing the limits of courage, resilience, and compassion amidst the unforgiving might of nature. My role, once that of an invisible observer, had morphed into that of a participant in a shared tragedy, a witness to the incredible spectrum of human behavior in the face of disaster. As the Titanic's fate became irrevocably sealed, the ship's majestic frame groaning and creaking as it succumbed to the icy grip of the sea, I found myself caught in the vortex of human emotion and desperation that swirled through its decks. The grandeur that had once defined this floating palace now served as a stark, tragic backdrop to the chaos and heartache of its final hours. The loading of the lifeboats was a scene of pandemonium and poignant sacrifices, a testament to both the best and worst of what we are capable of in our darkest moments. The air was thick with the cold breath of the Atlantic, mingling with the cries of children, the shouts of men, and the steady, somber instructions of the crew. Through it all, I moved, driven by an intense desire to aid in whatever way I could, my earlier anonymity aboard this vessel now cast aside in the face of such overwhelming need. I witnessed scenes that would haunt me for the rest of my days. The heart-wrenching decisions made by passengers and crew alike were a testament to the human spirit's capacity for sacrifice and love. I watched as a mother, tears streaming down her face, entrusted her child to a stranger in a lifeboat, her eyes conveying a silent plea for the child's safety over her own. I saw crew members forcibly holding back men who, in their panic, sought to override the women and children first protocol, their actions a grim but necessary measure to preserve some semblance of order and fairness. Amidst this turmoil, my own perspective shifted from one of survival to one of witness. I found myself helping where I could, guiding families to lifeboats, comforting those who had no choice but to wait and hope, and lending my strength to the crew as they worked tirelessly to lower the boats into the dark, unforgiving sea. As the ship's final hour approached, the chaos of loading lifeboats gave way to a somber resignation for those of us remaining on board. The stark reality that not all would escape this tragedy became a heavy cloak around our shoulders, the icy wind a constant reminder of the fate that awaited us. Yet, even in these darkest moments, there were flashes of incredible humanity, strangers holding hands, prayers whispered together, and shared looks of understanding that transcended words. My own heart was heavy with a mix of fear, sorrow, and a strange sense of peace. Having witnessed the breadth of human emotion from the heights of selfless courage to the depths of despair, I felt an overwhelming connection to every soul aboard. The Titanic, in its final hours, became more than just a ship. It was a microcosm of life itself, with all its beauty and tragedy laid bare for the world to see. As the ship tilted further, sending objects and people sliding into the abyss, the sounds of the night took on a surreal quality, a haunting melody of human and mechanical agony. And through it all, I remained, a silent observer to the end, my heart etched with the stories of those around me, their faces and voices forever a part of me as the Titanic, once a symbol of human achievement, succumbed to the sea, taking with it lives and dreams into the cold embrace of the deep. As the Titanic's journey reached its catastrophic zenith, the reality of the situation bore down on me with a crushing weight. For days, I had navigated the hidden spaces of this colossal vessel, a silent specter oblivious to the full scope of human vulnerability. But as the ship's demise became inevitable, the enormity of the disaster unfurled before me, a tapestry of human fate interwoven with steel and ice. In those final hours, my heart was besieged by a tumult of emotions. Fear, certainly, was among them, a primal, engulfing dread not just for my own mortality, but for the hundreds of souls around me, each facing their own private abyss. Yet, it was the profound sorrow that cut the deepest, a sorrow for the dreams that would sink with this ship, for the stories that would remain untold, and for the stark realization that this, the greatest of human creations, could so easily be undone by the indifferent might of nature. The emotional impact of witnessing such despair was overwhelming. I saw in the faces of those around me a reflection of my own internal turmoil. There was an elderly couple, clasping hands as they gazed out at the icy waters, a silent acceptance in their eyes that spoke volumes of their life together and the end they now faced. There were the children, too young to fully comprehend the magnitude of the situation, yet sensing the fear in their parents' hurried whispers and tight embraces. Each life aboard was a story abruptly interrupted, a narrative cut short not by the natural conclusion of time, but by a tragedy of monumental proportions. This realization was a burden, a heavy cloak that draped over my shoulders and seeped into my very being. I pondered the myriad what-ifs, the decisions, large and small, that had led each of us to this point, aboard a sinking ship in the middle of the Atlantic. The unfairness of it all, the sheer randomness of fate, struck me with a force that was almost paralyzing. But within this maelstrom of despair, there emerged a kernel of something unexpected: resilience. As I moved among the passengers, offering words of comfort or lending a helping hand wherever I could, I found within myself a wellspring of determination. It was as if the very act of witnessing so much loss, so much fear, imbued me with a purpose I had never known in my life before this voyage. I was no longer just a stowaway, a shadow moving unseen. I was a part of this human tapestry, and if this was to be our final chapter, then I would face it not as an outsider, but as one among many, sharing in the collective heartache and hope. The emotional impact of the impending disaster became a catalyst for a profound personal transformation. In the face of overwhelming odds, amidst a cacophony of panic and the chill of the encroaching waters, I discovered an inner strength born from vulnerability, a strength that propelled me forward, urging me to do whatever I could to ease the burden of those around me. This shared ordeal, this collective confrontation with our mortality, stripped away the barriers that had once defined us, passenger and crew, first class and third, stowaway and society. As the final moments approached, and the inevitability of the Titanic's fate became undeniable, the emotional tumult within me settled into a solemn resolve. The magnitude of the disaster had indeed left its mark, carving deep grooves of sorrow and loss into my soul. Yet, it also revealed the unyielding spirit of humanity, the capacity for courage, compassion, and connection, even in the darkest of times. This, I realized, was the true legacy of the Titanic, not just a tale of hubris and tragedy, but a testament to the indomitable human spirit, forever etched in the icy waters of the North Atlantic. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a pale light over the endless expanse of water, I found myself among the fortunate, huddled in a lifeboat with survivors whose faces were etched with the trauma of the night. The cacophony of screams and the desperate clamor for safety had given way to a haunting silence, punctuated only by the occasional sob or whispered prayer. We were the lucky ones, yet as we drifted, waiting for rescue, the weight of survival pressed heavily upon us. The ordeal of the Titanic's final hours remained vivid in my mind, a series of images too potent to be dimmed by the passage of time. The stark terror in the eyes of those I could not save, the anguished cries that filled the air as the ship made its final descent into the icy depths. These memories formed a relentless tide, ebbing and flowing, but never truly receding. I grappled with the guilt of survival, the unanswerable question of why fate had spared me when so many others had perished. In the days that followed our rescue, as the world reeled from the magnitude of the disaster, I found myself adrift in a sea of grief and confusion. The Titanic, once a symbol of human achievement and ambition, had become a watery grave for those whose lives were cut tragically short. The stories of heroism and sacrifice, of dreams unfulfilled and families torn asunder, filled the newspapers. Yet, behind each headline lay the unspoken stories of those like myself, survivors whose lives had been irrevocably changed by the events of that fateful night. As I attempted to rebuild my life, the shadow of the Titanic loomed large. I found solace in sharing my story, in bearing witness to the tragedy, and ensuring that the memories of those who had been lost were kept alive. Yet, the act of remembering was a double-edged sword, bringing both a sense of catharsis and a renewed sense of loss with each retelling. The faces of those I had seen in the ship's final hours haunted my dreams, a constant reminder of the cost of human hubris and the fragility of life. The Titanic disaster had thrust upon me a burden of knowledge, a profound understanding of the thin line that separates life from death, hope from despair. It had also bestowed upon me an unexpected gift, a renewed appreciation for the preciousness of each moment and the importance of forging connections that transcend the barriers of class, circumstance, and fate. In the years that followed, as the Titanic settled into its silent tomb on the ocean floor, I dedicated myself to honoring the memory of those who had been lost. Whether through written accounts, speaking engagements, or quiet moments of reflection, I became a custodian of their stories, a keeper of the flame that would illuminate their lives and sacrifices for generations to come. The tragedy of the Titanic, with its tales of human courage, its stark lessons about the limits of technology, and its poignant reminders of the unpredictability of life, became a touchstone for my existence. In the end, the ship's legacy was not only one of loss and mourning, but also of resilience and hope. It served as a testament to the indomitable human spirit, capable of enduring the darkest of nights and emerging into the light of dawn, forever changed but unbowed. As one of the survivors, I carried forward not just the memories of a night that had shaken the world, but also the responsibility to live in a way that honored those who could not tell their own stories. In the shadow of the Titanic, amidst the echoes of its vanished souls, I found a purpose born of tragedy, a commitment to remember, to bear witness, and to ensure that the lessons of that night would not be forgotten by the annals of history. The sinking of the Titanic, a catastrophe that claimed the lives of more than 1,500 souls, stands not just as a testament to a tragic night, but as a profound lesson on human nature and the limits of our own hubris. As a stowaway-turned-survivor, my journey from the bowels of the ship to the lifeboat adrift in the North Atlantic has been one of unimaginable horror, profound revelation, and unexpected personal growth. In the aftermath, amidst the swirling maelstrom of emotions and the haunting memories of those final hours, I've come to reflect deeply on the nature of human pride and the inevitable fall it precipitates. The Titanic was billed as unsinkable, a marvel of modern engineering, a symbol of mankind's triumph over nature. The ordeal has also laid bare the rawest facets of human nature, both noble and ignoble. In the face of impending doom, I witnessed acts of unparalleled bravery and self-sacrifice, alongside instances of cowardice and desperation. These moments, etched forever in my mind, serve as a stark reminder of the choices we face when confronted with our own mortality. They reveal the essence of character, for in the end, it is not our social standing or wealth that defines us, but our actions in the darkest of times. Personally, the disaster has wrought a profound transformation within me. Thrust into a situation of life and death, I was forced to confront my own fears and limitations. The experience of navigating the chaos, of seeking to aid my fellow passengers, has imbued me with a newfound strength and resilience. I have emerged from the tragedy with a deeper appreciation for the fragility of life, a more profound understanding of the importance of compassion and community, and a renewed commitment to living with purpose and gratitude. Moreover, the Titanic's demise has taught me the value of heeding warnings and the importance of preparation and vigilance. It serves as a somber reminder that, despite our advancements, we are not masters of the universe, but participants in a delicate dance with nature, subject to its whims and caprices. In the years since the sinking, as I've navigated the waters of survival and remembrance, I've come to view the Titanic not just as a ship that sank, but as a crucible that tested the limits of human endurance, courage, and spirit. The lessons drawn from its ill-fated voyage continue to resonate, a cautionary tale of the dangers of overreaching, and the imperative to respect the forces that lie beyond our comprehension. As I reflect on the personal growth wrought by this ordeal, I recognize that the greatest lesson of all is the enduring power of the human spirit. In the face of unspeakable tragedy, amidst loss and despair, there remains a capacity for hope, for rebirth, and for transformation. The legacy of the Titanic, with its stories of loss, love, and heroism, endures as a beacon, guiding us through the darkness, reminding us of our shared humanity, and inspiring us to navigate the treacherous waters of life with humility, courage, and a profound respect for the mysteries that lie beneath the surface. Years have passed since the night the Titanic succumbed to the icy grip of the North Atlantic, a night that remains etched in my memory with a clarity that time has not dulled. The world has moved on, and yet, for me and for many others touched by the tragedy, the echoes of that night reverberate still, a haunting reminder of the lives intertwined with the fate of the doomed vessel. As I sit to pen these reflections, the distance of years has lent me a perspective that was once consumed by the immediacy of survival and grief. The Titanic, in its majestic beauty and tragic downfall, has become more than a shipwreck in the annals of history. It has evolved into a symbol of human aspiration, vulnerability, and the indomitable spirit of those who face their darkest hour aboard her. I often find myself pondering the fate of those I met during those brief fateful days. The kind steward, whose suspicions of my presence aboard the ship gave way to an unlikely camaraderie, the wealthy family, ensnared in their secrets and societal expectations, whose destiny I never came to learn, the engineers, whose pride in their work was overshadowed by the looming disaster. Their stories, like so many others, were submerged in the cold waters, leaving behind a silence where once there were dreams, laughter, and the mundane concerns of life. The voices lost to the deep seemed to call out, a ghostly chorus bearing witness to the myriad human stories that converged on the Titanic. In my quieter moments, I am visited by the specters of what might have been, of the potential unfulfilled and the futures unexplored. These reflections are not bound by regret, but are steeped in a profound sense of connection to the past, to the shared humanity that survives even the greatest of calamities. My own journey since those harrowing hours has been one of introspection and, in some ways, redemption. The experience aboard the Titanic has shaped the contours of my existence, guiding my choices and my path in ways I could not have anticipated. It has taught me the value of life, the importance of compassion, and the necessity of confronting our fears with courage and resilience. The Titanic's legacy, as I have come to understand it, lies not solely in the tragedy of its sinking, but in the stories of those who lived and died, in the lessons gleaned from the precipice of disaster. It serves as a reminder of our own mortality, yes, but also of our capacity for hope, for survival, and for finding meaning in the face of overwhelming darkness. As the years stretch on, the story of the Titanic and those it carried with it to the bottom of the sea continues to resonate, a timeless echo of the human condition. In remembering, we honor not just the memory of those lost, but the enduring spirit of all who navigate the uncertain waters of life, steering through the storms in search of safe harbor. The voices from the deep, though silent, speak still, a testament to the strength found in vulnerability, the bravery in facing the unknown, and the unbreakable bonds of our shared human journey. As I revisit the story of the Titanic, it is with a reverence for the past, a gratitude for the present, and a hopeful gaze toward the future, guided by the lessons learned from the depths. The sinking of the Titanic, a night that set the course for the rest of my life, has left an indelible mark on my soul. In the years following the disaster, I've found myself adrift on a sea of introspection, navigating the waves of memory and the tides of change that have swept over me. The experience aboard that ill-fated vessel has been a compass by which I've charted my path forward, guiding my beliefs, actions, and the very essence of my being. Surviving the Titanic imbued me with a profound appreciation for the fragility of life and the impermanence of our worldly endeavors. This realization has steered me towards a life of purpose, where the pursuit of meaning eclipses the chase for material success. I've dedicated myself to causes greater than my own, driven by the memory of those whose voices were silenced that cold April night. In their honor, I've sought to make a difference, to contribute to a world where compassion and humanity take precedence over vanity and hubris. The lessons of that night have also reshaped my beliefs about the nature of courage and vulnerability. Witnessing the best and worst of human behavior under the shadow of disaster taught me that bravery is not the absence of fear, but the will to act in spite of it. This understanding has encouraged me to face my own challenges with a resilience I never knew I possessed, to embrace vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness. Moreover, the Titanic's tragic end has instilled in me a deep sense of humility and respect for the natural world. The arrogance that deemed the ship unsinkable now serves as a cautionary tale of human overreach. I've since lived my life in acknowledgement of our limitations, advocating for a harmonious existence with the environment that sustains us, aware that our survival depends on our ability to listen to and learn from the forces beyond our control. My relationships, too, have been profoundly influenced by the events of that night. The bonds formed in the face of adversity, the acts of kindness and sacrifice I witnessed, have taught me the value of deep, meaningful connections over superficial acquaintances. I've strived to build relationships based on mutual respect, understanding, and a shared commitment to uplifting one another, embodying the spirit of community that shone, even in the darkest of times. Professionally, the trajectory of my career took a turn towards endeavors that reflect my values and beliefs. The pursuit of wealth for wealth's sake lost its allure. Instead, I've found fulfillment in work that contributes to the welfare of others, that challenges societal inequities, and fosters a sense of collective responsibility. Whether through writing, advocacy, or mentorship, my efforts have been dedicated to leaving a legacy that, in some small way, mirrors the courage and compassion I was privileged to witness aboard the Titanic. In reflection, the disaster that could have been the end was, in many ways, a beginning. It marked the birth of a new perspective, a life lived with intention and gratitude. The tragedy of the Titanic, with its profound losses and heroic tales, has been a guiding star in my journey, reminding me of the capacity for growth amidst grief, for hope amidst despair, and for transformation amidst tragedy. As I look back on the years since the sinking, I see a life shaped by the lessons of that night, a testament to the power of the human spirit to endure, to learn, and to emerge from the depths with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper connection to the essence of what it means to be truly alive.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the video. We highly recommend you watch the next video here. Oops. I'm waiting for you to click. Yes, you've clicked. Happy watching.